How do I explain that? I don't know. You know, you're dealing with a different reality. 35 foot diameter on the outside. And you're awed when you go in there because you're thinking, okay, something's not right here. Because it looks much bigger on the inside, but how can that be? I can explain it now, but it's hard for people to understand. It was hard for me to understand when I first heard about it.
Who is responsible for removing the bodies of these beings before your team gets there? Today on Cosmic Disclosure, we have Sergeant Clifford Stone, ex-military person who has been involved with extraterrestrials. Sergeant Stone, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, sir. Once again, it's my great pleasure to be here.
In your experience, have you ever been exposed to the inside of an extraterrestrial craft?
There were times that I had to go inside the craft itself.
What was that like?
It was scary. You never knew what to expect. No two events were exactly identical, and you never knew what to look for. I'd have to go in, and from time to time, the guy I always called the colonel would have me doing things. I wasn't a mechanic. I had no technical knowledge of anything. And one thing I want to make clear from the get-go, in each instance, every craft we went into, because on sci-fi movies, you know, it looks like they hadn't been doing their house cleaning. They were they were like clinically clean, like you were in a surgical room. They didn't have cobwebs, things of this sort. But the situation is that you go in there and you know you've just entered another reality. I mean, here it is. We have a craft, 35 foot diameter on the outside. This would have been in 1986, I believe. We went in, and you know, and there were several instances like this, but it never ceases to amaze you. 35 foot diameter on the outside, and you're awed when you go in there because you're thinking, okay, something's not right here, because it looks much bigger on the inside, but how can that be? It's only 35 foot diameter on the outside. It couldn't be any bigger than that. And it definitely couldn't be bigger than that on the inside. But when you go in, I can explain it now, but it's hard for people to understand. It was hard for me to understand when I first heard about it. But then you'd go ahead and look up, because I mean, you know, it was only maybe, 12 feet high, things of this sort. Yet, here it is. This was maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 foot tall on the inside, and I'm wondering, how can this be? So we would go ahead and measure that. The interesting thing, you saw no lights, but it was perfectly bright on the inside, not overlit, not underlit. You had no problem seeing. But then, you know, here it is. Remember, we're working, and I have to stress this, 35 foot in diameter. But then you have like ladders that go up on several levels, maybe I think 3, I'm going to say 3, it could have been more, but at least three levels. Then you'd have little walkways there, and you'd have compartments there that you know, people or entities, and I'm sorry, I still consider them to be people within their own right, that would go in there. I don't know whether they were living quarters, what they were actually there for, but they served a purpose, but they were rooms on board the craft.
Was there a type of cockpit or chair or anything like that more human?
There was a control department compartment, which they obviously had, the way I remember it, there was like a control panel. There was 2 seats in front. There was a seat in back, and on back over by where the entrance was, on each side there was a seat there. Now, the control panels was unique in that they didn't have, like, you know, on board a fighter aircraft you have a control stick. It was like I know this now, but it was just the impression at the time that they were controlling with the instruments they had by just putting their hands over it or moving them over it, and they could control the craft that way.
When you walked onto this craft, did you experience any physical anomalies?
There were times you experience things. For example, you would feel like when you go from a low elevation to a higher elevation, you would have like your ears pop. You would feel like there was a heavy pressure on you from time to time. And you would experience this when you went from compartment to compartment. And how do I explain that? I don't know.
Each compartment's interdimensional.
Absolutely. And also, it created its own atmosphere. And at times you might feel you've been on the craft for only a couple of minutes, get out and find out that maybe an hour or two had passed. And I don't know how to explain that. Now, did somebody in the team know what that was all about? I'm quite sure that the guy I always called the colonel and his associates, they knew, but they never felt that it's necessary to explain it to us. They'd just tell us, you know, you're dealing with a different reality. That's all you need to know.
Of all these craft that you investigated, were there any life forms on board?
There was life forms on a couple that I was involved with, the one at Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. Now, I didn't go on board that craft, but I actually got to see the entity half out of the side opening of the craft underneath the cabin. I know there were at least 3 bodies in that craft. The other craft had like a Chinese figure on it, and in this instance, the entity was injured. They went ahead and, you know, there's only one, which is hard to explain, because I have every reason to believe that when they came to that craft, they were trying to get all of their people, because they're going to come and try to rescue these people. To leave the one behind, that was kind of weird and kind of strange. But we went ahead and we actually rendered first aid to it, and they moved it off. That was the first thing they did when we got on scene for that crash. That was the Wyoming crash.
And that was the only time you saw beings that were either dead or they've already been taken off the craft before you get there?
As far as them being associated with a craft site that I was at, the one I helped there at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, I wasn't aware of what type of craft it got off. I don't even know how they came into possession with that one.
Who is responsible for removing the bodies of these beings before your team gets there?
Well, a lot of times it may not have been us that removed the bodies, or the survivors that had no injuries to them. Like I say, they'd send out a distress call, and a lot of times their own people would show up first before we even got there. We were to stop and go into a staging mode if their people were there rescuing them. We were not to go ahead and move in on them. Why that was, I have no idea. I mean, maybe we could have offered assistance, but that wasn't the game plan. You had normally 2 teams that would show up. You'd have the A team, which was the first one to arrive within the first 2 hours. Then you would have the B team. They had to be there within 4 hours. So was there a B team or an A team that arrived there before us? I don't know, because, you know, they never designated. The only time I had it designated was there at Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania.
Was there any time a pilot was needed to take the craft out, or did they always just airlift the craft out or take it on a flatbed?
Well, we never flew one out. And right now, I'll tell you, the interesting thing about that is that you hear all these talks about we back engineered a flying saucer and we're flying them. Well, then it wasn't the guy I always called the colonel. This was an older guy, and I'm quite sure he was a scientist, and I'd say a civilian scientist because he didn't talk like the military. Anyhow, he went ahead and he said, you know, we might be able to get a pilot to where we can go ahead and get him to lift one of these things off into the air and fly it around for a little while. The problem we would have is getting him to land it in one piece. So no, I don't think, now did we back engineer a specific craft that was similar to some of these craft, but far removed from the real technology that was involved in that craft? Did we do that? Have we been flying? I would suggest yes, we have done that.
With your own gravitational field, I just believe that they can do an unlimited amount of speed because you're not in this 3D. You have created this ionosphere around you. So everyone in the craft can do 1,000 miles an hour, make a right-hand turn, and they don't know or feel anything because they're like barely in this dimension.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole situation is that they're in a world all to themselves because they have that atmosphere and they're not feeling the G-forces that are being exerted. And also, you got to understand that there's something special about the craft too, because when the craft is going through these gyrations of speed, two things happen. One, they're supposed to be displacing the air around them where it goes over the craft, collapse, making a loud sonic boom behind the craft. This isn't happening. I don't know why. There's no explanation for that. Also, when a craft is going that fast, it generates a lot of heat on that aircraft. Yet, the aircraft is not disintegrating in flight. And we're not talking 1,000-2,000 miles an hour. We're talking speeds maybe up to 5,000-6,000 miles an hour in the atmosphere.
What did you personally experience from all of this?
Bottom line is that it was more confirmation that we are not alone in the universe. It brought great concern to me was that were we learning that they were not hostile towards us, that we were learning if we gain anything from gathering advanced technology here, it should be for the advanced technology to get us to explore other places in the cosmos. I already knew that we were a world in quarantine because if we go ahead with our warlike ways, they're not going to let us go out into space.
How was the inside of the craft compared to the others?
Now, in this instance, you actually had a cockpit on top of the craft. You had once again, you had 3 seats. You had 2 in front, 1 in back. That, I'm pretty sure, is where they were controlling the craft from. You had rooms, but you didn't have that big bay area. And like I say, this is a much smaller craft. Even on the inside, there was no difference from the inside and the outside as far as size.
Were these seats that you've seen in the craft, the 3 seats, did they have controls on them? How large were they? Were they for smaller beings or larger beings?
The seats on this craft were much smaller, like for smaller entities. But at the same time, the seats were comfortable. They were what you'd call, if you sat on, you wanted to be warm, you'd be warm. You want to be a little cool, you'd be a little cool. They did not have like this. I mean, they looked like pure metal seats, but yet they didn't make you feel like you were sitting on metal. In front, there was that control panel again with the seats in front. You had, with the one in back on this craft, you had a control panel back there. And I don't know, who was the pilot and what the other 2 were supposed to be doing, but all 3 were connected to the operation of the craft.
What were the colors of the craft inside and out?
Inside and out, they were gray. I mean, metallic
Like
gray, period. The panels, yeah, they had different colors, the gauges and all that. Some of the control panels were control instrument, I'll put it that way.
How big were these
had black-
control panels?
They were maybe about that big, and in front of each of the seats.
About 3 feet each.
3.5, 4 feet, something like that. And
Was anything displayed on there? Was there?
Oh, they
anything
had
on-
gauges.
Gauges.
And some of them were like the gauges I told you about before that seemed two-dimensional. Some of them were three-dimensional on some of the craft. On this craft, they had some of both. They had some three-dimensional gauges, then they had the two-dimensional gauges. This one also had switches. Those switches were black. And
like
a
metal
toggle
switch? A toggle switch.
And I don't know what that was all about. In the center between the two panels, you had a large screen, and I'm pretty sure that was to view maybe the ground. Now you could see outside of the cockpit, but this large screen, it could be for surveillance on the ground or something like that. I'm quite sure they had a setup that was similar to us taking photographs, taking pictures, but from their technology and from their perspective. None of it was operational when we went aboard the craft. Why it was there, it was intact, but there was no entities, no bodies.
What was the shape of the craft?
This craft was more like an egg-shaped craft because it was, larger in front, then it curved to the back.
What dimensions are we looking at?
Right here, we're looking at a craft that's probably about 30, 35 foot long and maybe 12 to 15 foot tall.
What other shapes of craft have you seen in the past?
I saw a cigar-shaped craft. I did not have the privilege of going in it. I had to stay out. There was an opening and there were people going in and out, but they had specific tasking to do. There have been other craft that appear to be like, I don't know how to put this, but lens-shaped craft.
And did you notice anything in particular about all the crafts that maybe had something in common?
Not that I can recall. The, shall I say, battleship gray or whatever was a commonality among all of them. I mean, they wasn't looking to go ahead and have spectacular colors, things of this sort. The lights they had wasn't like the lights that we have on our craft. They didn't really need the lights. The lights actually served a purpose of aiding in their mode of propulsion. And I can't explain that because I actually ask, okay, why is it they have sometimes blue lights, sometimes red and blue lights, sometimes just white lights? And the way the colonel thought and explained it to me, says, well, I guess I can tell you that the lights have nothing to do with letting other craft that might be around them know that they're there. It has everything to do with their propulsion system.
If you enjoyed this, make sure to watch the next video on Awaken Zone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, but you won't want to miss what's coming next.